We have over 600 active clients / deployments of 360 Suite right now. And the most popular document for all our customers is overwhelmingly WebI. And over the years, we've heard the same question time and time again. What can 360 Suite do to report our WebI, to improve our WebI report performance? In this session, we'll present 10 easy steps on how to do it. So with that, we're going to jump off. The first tip we would like to cover is how to limit the number of rows being returned to reports. Pauline?
Okay. Yeah, so all of these steps, just want to point out that there are many different things that you can do to improve WebI performance, and some of these you may have these implemented and your reports run fine. So this is just best practices, giving you some information about maybe why your WebI reports are running slow. So yeah, number one is limiting the number of reports returned. The number of rows returned to your reports. So WebI is often wide open. Users can pull whatever objects they want, and sometimes they don't know how much data is actually there. So like you had said in the poll, your users needed or have asked for training. So if they don't have training, if they're not really familiar with how to use the system, they might return too much data. So you want to be able to look at determining how many rows are actually being returned. So what is so auditor can give you this information. 360 Eyes can also give you this information, so you can actually report on how many rows are being returned to your reports. You want to figure out what's a reasonable amount. So obviously you don't want to, maybe users do need to return 500,000 rows to a report. I'm not sure. Every environment is going to be different. You want to avoid partial results so that users aren't getting, not all the data, but you also want to avoid users returning too much data. I've seen users that don't want to give up their old systems, so they use BusinessObjects as a data dumping tool. They dump all the data, import it to their old system, and won't give it up. That's not really the purpose of BusinessObjects, and that's certainly going to impact performance. So sometimes maybe it's a matter of contacting the users, figuring out what they're doing, giving them training. Maybe they need to filter their data. But you can also place restrictions at the universe level. So if you're using universes with which you probably are with your Webis, you can do this manually with the information design tool or with universe design tool, and you could also do it in bulk with 360 view. So giving an example of what this is a report that comes out of 360 Eyes, and start looking at what are users returning. So if you start seeing this last report here is 2.8 million rows, that seems like a lot to return to a WebI report. So it's supposed to be an business intelligence report. It's kind of hard to really analyze that much data. So what really are they doing with that amount of data? So taking a look at what users are returning, and then kind of getting a reasonable limit, which you can set, at the universe level. And you can continue to report off of it, maybe even set up a report. So if you set a limit at 1 million, you can see when they're hitting that 1 million, so that okay, maybe we set it too low, maybe we need to contact the users. So that is the first first tip.
So yes, our second tip is adjusting your array fetch size. So first of all, the array fetch size sets the maximum number of rows for each fetch from the database. Tuning this size for your environment can greatly improve the performance.
Right. So the default array fetch size, and this has changed over the versions, but for the universe design tool, it's 10. And for the information design tool, I believe it's 10 as well. That may be too low. And this is going to also depend on your environment. So you don't want to set it too high, because if you don't have the network capacity and you set that too high, you're going to have other issues. And if it's too low, you're going to get too many fetches to the database, and your queries are going to take longer. So this setting really can have a huge impact, but you're going to need to do some testing to determine what setting works well for your environment. Just an example, so if your query, your report query is returning 5,000 records, and the array fetch size is set to 100, the business objects has to connect 50 times to get all of those records to retrieve 100 at a time from the database. So that's of course going to be take some time. And here's just a table of an example of some testing that someone had done. So this was retrieving 1.2 million records. When the array fetch size was set to 10, it took 95 seconds to retrieve those. When it was set to 100, it took 37 seconds, and when it's set to 1,000, it took 18 seconds. So that it's in green because that was kind of the optimal setting for WebI for their environment. So again, he has a huge impact on performance, but again, you'll need to test it, make sure it works with your environment.
All right. Since data providers run serially and run times can add up quickly, we suggest to try not to account for all scenarios that you have. Sometimes you need to create another document rather than just putting it all in one. My colleague Pauline has coined this the kitchen sink report. And what we like to do is try to avoid making these mega, huge, humongous reports.
Right. So creating one report that has needs of every user in your system is not the best approach. So limiting the number of data providers. So I've seen reports with or documents with 20 data providers. It's a lot of queries. They have to they run sequentially. It's going to take a long time to run. The suggested limit is 5, and definitely don't exceed more than 15. With 360 eyes, you can actually document and see where do you have reports that exceed that. So this particular report is just counting the data providers. So it gives me the path and the document name, and I'll show you what that looks like. But that's definitely a good thing to limit the number of queries. And limiting the number of report tabs. So, you've got, say you've had 20 queries and 20 report tabs, that report's going to take a long time to run. And, maybe the users only want 1 or 2 tabs. Maybe it doesn't make sense to have it all in one report. So, suggested limit is 10 and definitely don't exceed 20. I think 20 is definitely a lot. And here's an example of a document. So we have actually a document in 360 eyes that'll show you how many report tabs are, any documents that have more than 20 report tabs. And I have some of this recorded just to show that was my. So yeah, this is counting data providers. So this is a 360 eyes report that is showing the number of data providers, and you can sort it however you want and filter out for those that are exceeding the best practices limit. So you can identify, users, maybe contact them or contact the developer to suggest that they limit that. And same thing with oops. Same thing with the report tabs. You can document that as well.
Okay, so again, limiting the queries and report tabs helps avoid kitchen sink reports. And one of the ways to do that is by creating smaller reports and linking them together using OpenDocument. And now Pauline's going to demonstrate how to do that.
Right. So OpenDocument's a really useful feature. It's very easy to implement. So there's just a format of the URL that's needed. So in this example, it's the URL of my business object server, the port, BOE. I add OpenDocument, OpenDoc, and then it's platform specific. So in my example or my environment, I'm using Java, so opendocument.jsp is what I use. If you have a .NET environment, you would use this ASPX extension. And then there are even parameters that you can pass to the OpenDocument link. So you could pass the things that you've filtered in the source document. There is towards the end of this slides, towards the end of the slides, we have some links to some more resources, and there's one on OpenDocument that'll give you more details about all of the things that you can pass to OpenDocument. But in my example, I'm just going to show how to link the documents. So here's my URL. This is a URL that I used, and all I'm doing is providing the CUID of the document I'm linking to. So let me show that real quick. So in my example, I have these two reports. I have a summary and a detail. So rather than putting everything in one, maybe the summary is doing a lot of calculation. It takes some time. So maybe I want to limit how much how many queries are being run, and so I'm going to do the linking to achieve that. So what I do is I take my summary document, and so I have this link here on my summary document. It says details. So that's actually linking to my detail document. I'm going to show you how that gets built. So I click on it and it launches in another, so it's a whole nother window. It launches that open document. So it accesses the report. So I'm going to show you how that actually gets created. It's very, very simple. So I just create a blank cell on the WebI report. Just give it a label. You can call it whatever you want. Click here, whatever you want to call it, the name of the report you're linking to. And then just expand it a little bit. Okay, so then I right click on it, and there's an option called linking. So see that? So when you right click on any cell, you'll see this linking option, and I'm going to select add hyperlink. Okay, and then I'm going to copy and paste that whole link that I just showed you in my slide that was specific for my environment. It contained the CUID that I wanted of the document I wanted to link to. So copy and paste that into that field, and then click the parse button there. So that's that whole URL that I showed how to format, parse that, apply that. And that's all there is to it. You save your report with that link. If I click on that, it's again going to launch my detail report. And again, there are things that you can pass to this, different parameters, so that you're linking individually to that report. So that's a good way to kind of limit those kitchen sink reports, so that you don't have to have a huge report, link them together. Users can pick and choose what they're interested in and not have to open up a document with 20 tabs. Okay.
Yes, and
Okay.
now our next step or tip is going to be query stripping. And Pauline, continue forward.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, query stripping. This was introduced in, I think it was in 4. Oh, it might have been 4.1. So this actually helps you remove unused objects from your query. So rather than if there are certain objects you've dragged into your query, but they're not actually displayed on your report, it will remove it. So in some cases that will improve the performance of your report. Some cases it may not have a huge impact, but there's just something that it might have an impact. So this can be set at the business layer of the IDT. So in your UNX universes, you can set so it basically turning on query stripping. It should, if you have it set in your universe, you shouldn't have to set it in WebI, but there is a possibility that you might. So there are settings within, or maybe it's not set in the universe and you want to set it in WebI. So you set it in the query properties in WebI as well as the document properties. And I'll show you what that looks like. Where did my, okay. So yeah, so back into my open document. So this particular, so if you go to properties, so up in the top left there, I go to properties and document. That's where there's a parameter. It's allow query stripping is right there. So I can turn that on, and that will enable it at the document property level. And then you can also enable it at the query level. So if you edit your query and then go into query properties, that little icon right there, there's also an option to enable query stripping. Okay, so that's the two ways that you can do that. apply those settings.
Okay, so our next tip is to remove unused report variables. And the reason is report variables contain logic that processes after the SQL runs. So it's all on your business object server. Each unused report variable gets processed and can impact performance of your reports.
Right. So yeah, this is a huge one. So I used to develop Desky reports, and if any of you out there had developed Desky reports, if you create a variable and you tried to remove it, it would tell you. You go to delete it, it'll say this variable is used in your report. Are you sure you want to delete it? And so I would go through and clean up everything because I knew it would tell me, and then I wouldn't delete the ones that said it was being used. Obviously, with WebI, you don't have that option. So a lot of time as a developer, you create variables as you're building a report. Sometimes you use them, sometimes you don't. And regardless of whether they're used in the report by the report or not, the logic in those variables still get processed, and they can significantly impact the performance of your report. I've seen reports that run for hours, and when you look at how many variables they have, I've seen reports with 100 variables, and it is, and people wonder why they're slow, and it's really the variables. So the SQL runs fine. The database, you ask your DBA, it's running fine. There's no impact on the database. It's the on the WebI side, it has to process all that logic after the SQL's returned to the report, and it can cause some significant delays. So I will show you what these reports look like, where we can actually, so 360 Eyes extracts all of your report variables, all the SQL from your reports, so you know what objects are in your reports. This is actually another way you can do query stripping. So with this table here, these are all the objects that were pulled into my query. If you see that used column, it shows 0 for some of these. So city, store name, month, they were pulled into the query, but they're not being used. So you can use that query stripping option, or going through and cleaning up your reports, so that WebI doesn't have to do the query stripping. You can actually remove them, and you can do the same thing with report variables. So it's going to show the filters on your reports as well as the variables, and it'll tell you whether they're used or not. So you can confidently remove anything that's not being used. So if you have variables that aren't used in the reports, you can remove them, and those will significantly, depending on how complex they are, and how many there are, they will significantly improve the performance of your reports. So I would definitely take a look at those. If you're having, some performance, take a look at the variables. Okay. Oops. Okay, so number 7, using query filters rather than report filters. So this kind of goes along the lines of some of the things that we've been talking about is, put the processing, put up as much as you can, the complex logic on the database rather than on the WebI side. So WebI can handle a lot, but if you don't need to make WebI handle that much, then your performance is going to be a lot better. So that's the case with query filters rather than report filters, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So when you, I think I'm using this example. So I'm taking a look at this report. This is again one of the 360 Eyes reports. So this report itself, maybe I want to filter on Universe. So I'm looking at a list of all the reports that are used in my environment. Maybe I only want to see reports that are running against a particular universe. So where I would want to implement that is in the query filter. So add it to the query filter, filter on the universe, data provider universe name, apply the filter there. That's going to give you better performance, because it's going to run at the database level. It'll filter the data. It'll return a smaller set of data to the report. If you set up that filter on the actual report, so in the table itself, that's going to cause the report to perform slower. So here I'm putting a filter on that table. So say I filter on the universe, itself. So it's going to first, you're basically returning a bunch of data, to the report, then after the fact, filtering it. It's more efficient to filter it in the query itself rather than after the report runs. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay.
Okay, so the WebI formula engine has strong capabilities. However, it does depend on logic. Some statements within a formula will always cause a calculation over the whole data set, while breaking down calculations into multiple steps, factorizing, will help the calculation engine work faster. Here's some tips that Pauline will explain deeper.
Right. So here are just a couple variables that I've seen recommended to not use if at all possible. Sometimes you need to use these and they work, and sometimes they won't cause a performance. But if you are having issues, so for each and for all, which I'll admit that I use this pretty frequently, but it's more efficient to use so in your formula. And same thing with using where is not as efficient as using if then else. So I will take a look at I'll take a look at what I'm referring to. So 360 eyes again, it does extract all the variables from your report. So you can find in this example here, you see where it says for each. So I'm pulling out where for each is used in my reports. And the nice thing is I can filter and say, okay, I want to know exactly where that particular variable is used across all my reports. So this is a report out of 360 eyes that will show me that. So when I refresh this report, there's a filter, enter the variable value. So it extracts the whole syntax of the variable, and I'm just looking for just that for each text within the variable. Filters that out, and what's returned to me are all the reports that contain that. And we had shown you, was that in this? I've done a few webinars today. I don't know if I showed you this already. I think it was in another webinar where I showed, yep. In the Bind webinar, we showed how you could bulk update report variables. And so if you wanted to, if you said, okay, I'm going to replace everywhere I see for each, I'm going to place it within, you could do that with 360 view. So I'll show you what that looks like. Yeah, so here's 360 view, logging into 360 view. So you can export a list of all of your variables. So I'm just going to pick that folder that I was just looking at. So a particular folder, I can extract all the WebI documents, the variables. It exports it to Excel. I can bulk update that Excel file. So here I export to Excel. And here's a list of all my variables within those reports. And I can go through, do a replace, find and replace, update the for each within. And yeah, so here I'll do a find and replace. And every for each within, replace that, do a replace all, and everything gets updated. I can save this, re-import it, and it will bulk update all of the variables. So under the administration, I have the update WebI document variables, and I can do a bulk update of all of those. I just choose the file that I just set up, and that will update that in bulk. Okay. Okay, moving on to the next one.
So in the past, WebI would automatically merge dimensions when objects were in two queries with the same name, but this isn't always what you want.
Right. So, yeah, merging dimensions has an impact on performance. Sometimes you need to do that. You have two queries, you want to merge, and only it's kind of like a union or a minus, and only show certain data. But I've seen in the past it used to automatically do that. So, say you have 10 queries and it's having to merge each data set. So it basically has to combine each data set. This is again after the SQL runs, it's doing that merge, and this could have a huge performance uh, impact. And so right now it doesn't do it by default, but in the past it did. So if you have documents that have been around, WebI documents that might be 5 years old, which I know a lot of our customers do, this is a good a good thing to take a look at. Sometimes you do need to merge, so don't go on merging anything um, if it does need to be merged. But if you see, where there are a bunch of documents being merged and they shouldn't be, um, this is a might help with the performance. So here's just an example. So this you see these two little, if you've got dimensions in your query, you'll see those two little blue kind of like on a slant. That means it's a merged dimension. So by right clicking on it, um, so it's merging on those. I have two queries, universe and report, and each of those has the object IID, and they've been merged. If I right click, I can unmerge them, so it separates the queries. And for this report, I definitely want them merged. Our developer would not be happy if I broke the report, so this is definitely needed. But in some cases, if it was just done by default or not knowing what the purpose was, this will improve performance of your report if you don't merge things by default. Okay.
All right. So as the slide says, put your database to work. Whenever possible, make your database do the work rather than your WebI reports. Best practice in the field is to retrieve as much as possible pre-aggregated data. Although WebI is very capable of aggregating data, your data source is stronger in these tasks. And Pauline will do a better, well, dive deeper into that.
Right. Yeah. So rather than, yeah, so this is kind of overarching on a lot of these points. Sometimes, you limit your data, you've done all you can to kind of improve things. But if you're trying to do really complex calculations and things at the WebI level, that's not always the right place to do it, especially if you have large amounts of data. It's going to take some time. And I've seen customers, I've worked with customers where they say, oh, business objects is slow, we're going to move to whatever the latest is available. But it's not the business objects is slow, it's how it's implemented. Putting your database, putting all the processing at the database level is going to improve your performance. So regardless of which business intelligence platform you're using, that's where that's where the capability should be, where all the processing. So if you can get in ETL, put all the calculations. If you need to see aggregated data, aggregate it, with ETL, so that when the users go run the reports, WebI's not doing the calculations; it's already done for them in the tables. If you can't do it ETL, try to do it within the database level. Even at the universe level is preferable to doing it at the WebI level. So just I know this is not something you can implement on your own usually, but it's definitely something to consider if you've tried everything and haven't been able to improve the performance, that's often going to help you.
All right. So we've gone through the 10 tips, but even after you did all of those, your job will still never be done. Users will still continue to create reports, data will still increase. You want to try to be proactive and identify your long-running WebI reports before they impact your platform and take it down. So what we'd like to do now is do a quick demo of what 360 Live allows you to set alerts when WebI's run for a threshold or for a time that you specify.
Okay. Yeah, so
Yep.
I will show you what this looks like. So being able to be alerted. So we get asked this all the time, I want to see what's running. Can you Sorry about that. I forgot to take out my, okay. So this is 360 Live, and this will allow you to monitor your Webis. To see what's running. You can set up alerts to say, okay, anytime a WebI report runs longer than 20 minutes, I want to be alerted. Okay, so you set up watchers. So within 360 Live, you set up watchers, you establish a threshold. So you can say, create a new watcher, give it a name. If anyone out there hasn't seen Live, this is essentially you're creating watchers so that you're alerted when certain thresholds are met. So in this case, it's setting up a threshold for long-running WebI reports. So in this case, I think I set it to maybe it's probably 20 minutes. So setting it up to, yeah, so for 20 minutes, I'm going to get alerted by email. It'll tell me who's running the report, the name of the report. It'll even tell me if it's an ad hoc report, because sometimes reports get run and they never finish. So a user runs a report, it might return 5 million rows, it doesn't ever return back. Your performance was impacted in your environment, but you don't ever see that report showing up on any audit report. That's what I used to do, try to look at auditor, okay, what was running at this time when the system, started basically going to a screeching halt, like what was actually running. And it's really hard if there are reports that, they get kicked off, they impact performance, but if they never come back, they never get saved, you'll never find them. They won't show up. So this gives you, so these are all the watcher values. It tells me what's being included in the particular watcher. I set up the email. You can set it up, send it to as many users as you want, so that everyone's notified. And then once that runs, you'll be alerted. You can set up, maybe you don't want it to be alerted all the time, but the nice thing is what I can see now is I can see what Webis are running at any given time. So say you get a call, the system's slow, you want to know what's running. You open up this watcher and it'll show you live all the WebI reports that are running at that given time. So we'll take a look at what that looks like. So by right-clicking on the watcher, give me a second, should be coming up. So this is probably one of the things that we get asked most frequently is, I want to know what's running, what might potentially be impacting the performance of the environment, and this will show you exactly what's running. So here you see there are two documents. So this new document, so it doesn't have a name, so it's an ad hoc report that I kicked off. That's my ID, P. Lancaster, shows that it's ad hoc. It's been running for 2 minutes. Maybe that's returning a lot of data. Maybe, if you start seeing the same user over and over again showing up when you're having issues, maybe they need some training, they need to know how to filter their data. And then this other document here, it's a document. I can see the name of the report. I can see which WebI process. If I hover over this, it'll show me which WebI process. So if you've got multiple nodes, you would be able to see which WebI process is processing that request. So I know exactly what's running at any given time. So this is really helpful to be able to look at that information. Okay. And then just a couple screenshots. If they're scheduled, they'll show up as well. So you'll see instances, the type for scheduled documents, ad hoc is any of the ad hoc, and then you'll see some of these other ones that I had shown. Okay.
All right, so we're up to our final poll of the day. Well, actually, of this session, there's still one more, so it's not of the day. So what is your interest level on this webinar topic? If we would open that up. This is also a good time. Well, first of all, please answer the question. Are you increasing my knowledge? Yeah, again, if you've been on services, this is the same slide you've seen at some of our other sessions. But again, if you could quickly take a minute, answer the poll. And also, if you have any questions, this is a great time to also drop into the chat, into the question section as well, and put any of those in there, because we'll be answering those soon. And while we're doing this, do we need a little more time? Just a little bit more time.
Okay, yeah, and we'll definitely get to your questions. I see some coming through. I was trying to get through, and we'll definitely get your questions answered there.
Yep.
Just give it 5 more seconds. Okay, I'm gonna close this now.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So today we've covered a lot of information, and the big pieces that what we showcase today from 360 Suite is a lot of eyes. You got to see a lot of pieces of how you can really use it on a day-to-day basis, not just using it for auditing purposes or for upgrades or migrations, but really for day-to-day basis to get to where you can really use it. But also in conjunction with 360 Eyes, you saw some of our 360 View product line, as well as at the end there, we saw a lot of what some of the big use cases for 360 Live. And again, our 360 tools really give you that value of time and cost savings, and hits it across the entire pyramid of your BI infrastructure, from the admin to your BI manager, and of course to your business levels.
Okay.
And we should have what our resources are today. Okay, a couple things. Number one, we are going to be sending you the tape recording of this session, but here are a couple of different other places that you can click onto to get some other further information, reference pieces, etc.
Right, and these are some of the things that I mentioned, like OpenDocument. This will have more details about all the different parameters that are available for that. Okay,
Yes.
so now
One of the things I definitely want to, and again, forgive me if this is like your sixth session, then you've heard this quite a bit. But we have a lot. But if you're interested in anything you saw today and would like to trial it, or would like a deeper demo into it, please let us know by just taking a quick second, dropping your name and phone number in the chat box, and I will get back to you. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, just to get to some of the questions, yeah, Mark was asking if we offered any tuning services. We definitely have some partners that we can put you in touch with to give you, that kind of support. But yeah, we don't offer any consulting, at least in the States, we don't. So I was asked, don't the queries run in parallel in 4.2? That there is the parallelized query option, but if you're running, again, I guess more of the point is the limiting the number of queries. If you've got 20 queries in your report, you definitely don't want those all running at once. That could impact performance. So you might be right about that, that they're not in serial, but yeah, they might be running in parallel. But that certainly could be, how many queries you have could certainly impact performance. So Steve was asking about the data provider list. So yeah, we have a document. It's called, let me log in here. There is a document that has the data providers. It's a fairly new document. So you probably have that in your environment. So if I go to 360 Eyes and the report folder and documentation, there's this report summary with bad documents. So you're just some sort of highlights some reports that may be, so documents with more than 20 report tabs, that would show up here, documents with more than 50,000 rows. So some of these things that we had talked about today, documents with more than 15 data providers. So this one is probably one report you want to look at. And you can, of course, modify these. So 50,000 to me, if you have a lot of data, 50,000 is probably low. So maybe you want to increase this so that when you're, looking at reports that might have problems, you're looking at it that's specific for your environment. So certainly modify these. But that's the report. Okay, so I'm asked if you can link formulas. So we have some reports that share complicated and layered formulas. This would require replication of logic across reports. Yeah, so there is a new feature in 4.2. It's oh gosh, what is it called? Where you can actually save variables and share them across. I know I'm trying shared elements. That's what it is. So you can actually share them across with users. I don't know about linking, what you're trying to get at with linking formulas, but yeah, I mean, you can within a variable you can call out another variable for sure, if that's what you mean by linking. Yeah, does query stripping work only with reports going against UNX universes? I believe so. That's a good question. That was introduced in 4.2, and I'm pretty sure that at the universe level, you can only turn that on for UNX universes. Let me see if I probably have, if I create a WebI, I can create a WebI against a UNV universe and see if I still have that option. So it may be an option at the universe, or sorry, at the document level. We have some old, let's see if these work. They might not work. Sorry, let me find a UNV universe that will work here. So if I just pull in a few, nope, probably, nope, shoot. Okay. Sorry, let me grab another. We only use UNX now for I, so none of those are going to work. And of course, this one doesn't have any. So let's see if I have. Yeah, I don't seem to have that query stripping option here. So I think that's right. I think it's only for UNX universes. It's not available for the UNV universes. So that's a good question.
Okay. Well.
Okay, we don't want
Anything left?
I have quite a few more. Yep. So can you bulk update the query stripping parameter? I don't believe so. You can set it at the document level. You should be able to set it at the universe level, and that will apply to any reports you develop against that. I was just showing you how to set it at the report level in case it's not set at the universe level. So I guess the bulk update would really be doing it at the universe level. Okay.
Is that it?
Nope, there's some more. Sorry, I have to read them. Some of them are quite long.
Yeah.
So in number 7, yeah, I'll get back to Larry. I'll get back to you on that. The database. Okay. Yeah, I'll get back to you on that. Yeah, so asking if I have any recommendations for setting up parameters on watchers using live. Yeah, I mean we have a quick start guide, and we do have some recommendations that I can share with you, Steve. I'll send that over to you after this. But yeah, there's certainly, making sure your WebI processes aren't exceeding any memory limits, or making sure the processes are up. So the state of your processes, you can set that. If there are certain processes that you find go down, maybe the adaptive job server, setting up those. So yeah, we can give you some recommendations for those. Okay. Yeah, so we definitely have the recordings used in the session. Oh, so the recordings that I used, it will be in the webinar, the ones that I used. We do have some of those recordings. So we have within our, we have a 360 360 Academy, where we are recording different things, how to use bind, how to do different things in the system, how to bulk update report variables. A lot of those we have, short videos that you can look at. Yeah, so we can give you some more information about the that 360 Suite Academy. That's been helpful for some users. Yes, and can 360 set the array fetch size? That setting we cannot. That has to be done the universe. We can set the limit, execution time on the universe. 360 can set the limit, the number of rows returned to a report, but yeah, we can't set the array fetch size anywhere with the tools, at least in bulk. So any way to find what Webis are using any particular WIPs. So yeah, with 360 eyes, you should be able to see which, when your documents run. I don't have a report out of the box. Well, so with 360, when I had shown 360 live, you would be able to see exactly which WebI processing server is running at that time, and then after the fact, you would be able to document that or see that with 360 eyes.